So welcome to the Duke English Department 2022 commencement ceremony. Welcome to all of our graduating seniors, to their families and friends, to our faculty and staff. And a special welcome and thank you to mothers for Duke has scheduled our commencement ceremony on this day, especially for you. My name is Rob Mitchell, and I'm the chair of Duke's English Department. The last time I stood on this stage for a departmental commencement ceremony was in the spring of 2019, when I was serving as my first year as chair. As I noted then, back in 2019, there are many parts of being a chair of a university department that are not especially fun, but this ceremony is one of the few parts of the position that makes the rest of the job feel worth it. And it's incredibly exciting to be here with you and to be part of this celebration of our fabulous graduating seniors. These students, soon to be alumni, are a huge part of why I am happy and proud to be part of the Duke English Department. What I didn't know in the spring of 2019, of course, is that I would not be able to stand on this stage for a commencement ceremony for another 3 years as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's now my fourth and final year as chair of the department, so this is a bittersweet moment for me. On the one hand, the fact that this is only the second time in 4 years that I've been able to stand in front of our graduating seniors reminds me of how much we have all lost during the last 2.5 years. On the other hand, the more important point right now is that we are all in this same room together right now, which means that we've endured and risen to the challenges of the last several years, even if it hasn't always felt that way. And since the point of this commencement ceremony is for all of us to celebrate together the accomplishments of our graduating seniors, the fact that this event can be in person this year feels especially important and moving, at least to me. I first want to make a comment that's intended primarily for the parents of our students. If you are here at this ceremony, then that means that you have already embraced, or at the very least accepted, that your child is an English major. But it's possible that every once in a while you find yourself wondering nervously, well, what kind of job is my child going to get with an English degree? Now, there are in fact quite a few social science research studies that show that people with English degrees indeed end up with personally fulfilling and financially remunerative jobs. But I'm not going to cite any of those studies to you. And instead, I would encourage you, parents, if you ever find yourself plagued by those worries, to take a look at the alumni section of our departmental website, which has job profiles of literally hundreds of our alumni. As you will see there, English majors not only find jobs, but they find exciting jobs and leadership positions in multiple fields, from law to business to academia to publishing, writing, to name just a few of the careers exemplified there. And now I'd like to make an observation that is primarily for our graduating seniors themselves. As you all know, the English department focuses primarily, though not exclusively, on written texts. And so in one sense, our work over the last 2.5 years, and your work over the last 4 years, was less affected by the pandemic than departments such as theater studies, dance, and music. Because even in a pandemic, we can read novels and poetry by ourselves in a socially distanced way, whereas performance-based majors such as theater studies, dance, and music had enormous problems with something even as basic as instruction, especially during the first year of social distancing. But even though we in the English department can read poetry, novels, essays, plays, while socially distanced, most of what we read focuses on our relationships with other people and how to understand those relationships. What we study in the English department is how to put into words, how to craft into sentences and paragraphs and stories and essays and poems and songs the meaning and nuances of our collective experience. And literary authors generally do this for experiences that are not self-evident, or we don't know exactly what we experienced or the significance of what we experienced. In our department, this love for carefully constructed, meaningful sentences requires a study of past authors, whether these earlier authors are medieval poets, early modern playwrights, 18th century essayists, 20th century screenwriters, 21st century songwriters, to name just a few of the different kinds of writers we study. We study these earlier writers because their works are a tradition, or to put it another way, a huge repository of carefully constructed series of words that have moved people and allowed people to come to grips with their experiences. And so, graduating seniors, this will, I think, be one of your tasks in your post-Duke life to help give expression to whatever it was that we all experienced over the past 2.5 years. I personally have no idea how to understand what happened over the past 2 years. I know the facts, of course, but I don't really know how to interpret that experience or even what possibilities it may open up in the future. But I feel certain that each of you, whether you focused on creative writing or interpreting texts in your time in our department, will help us to understand what it meant. And so I encourage you, as you go into your first jobs and begin to build the rest of your lives, to find ways to continue your interest in beautiful and meaningful language, and, perhaps even more important, to invent new ways of bringing that love of language to others. Some of you may be able to do this as the main focus of your jobs. For example, those of you who work as writers, or in the publishing industry, or in media jobs, or in law. But even if your job doesn't focus on the study or composition of meaningful language, please do continue to invent new ways to keep this interest alive and to communicate it to others. Okay, those are my welcoming comments. I'd next like to invite to the stage or to the podium the first of our student speakers, Anil Prasad.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I never thought when I first arrived at the gates of Duke that 4 years later I would find myself graduating with a major in English. In fact, I was certain I would be a basic pre-med, majoring in biology and minoring in something exotic like theater or music that would make me stand out in my medical school application. My sophomore year, in an attempt to cast myself as the rebel in my friend group, which consisted of all basic pre-meds, I announced with the resolve that I would major in English. They thought I was joking, and so did I, until I found myself filing for an English BA and donning the I chose English sticker proudly on my chest. "What are you doing?" my parents yelled at me through the phone that day. "What in the world are you thinking?" "I don't know, I wasn't thinking," I wailed back. At least, not with my head. And here's where I would say I was thinking with my heart, but in an attempt not to be cliche, I'll skip that. I had always wanted to be a writer. The allure of being skilled with words had always grasped at me, but never with enough conviction to get me to veer off my expected course. The daydream of being a novelist or an eloquent public speaker remained just that for the first half of my time at Duke, a fantasy confused to the musings of my brain, while I scribbled chicken scratch on my organic chemistry midterms and wailed in despair in my physics labs. But I could only do so much science before I got restless, and the pit in my stomach telling me that I wanted to do something different only grew louder and called my attention with more force. Perhaps it was that desire, to finally acquiesce to my fantasy, to take a step into unknown territory I had never thought to explore, that led my hand to check off English that day. I came into Duke a determined freshman, eager to take my first pre-med requisite, and I'm leaving a washed-up senior carrying back to California a soul battered and bruised by the STEM curriculum. But I'm also leaving a graduate in English, which has a value I'm only fully realizing now. It seems straightforward, but communication is part of everything. It's how we share stories, how we connect with others, how we receive information. Being a good communicator is a necessity in today's fast-paced world, but coming into Duke, I was so bad at it. As a freshman, I couldn't even talk to professors without my brain garbling my words. When internships asked for cover letters, I could barely string together sentences into any kind of coherent pitch. When I wanted to make a point, I could never find the conviction or the persuasive language to get my argument across, and often stayed silent at risk for embarrassing myself. More than anything, I think my time in the English department has shown me what it means to be a successful communicator and given me the confidence to work towards that goal. From reading the words of esteemed authors and poets in centuries present and past, we've observed the many ways in which words and authors' voice are used to embolden stances, communicate thoughts, and share ideas. And responding to, discussing, and picking apart their works have been exercises of emulation, for all of us to practice the techniques that make for strong writing. Now, I'm not saying I'm a perfect communicator by any means. We've all only begun our foray after all. However, I can say with certainty that we've all made progress, and that the person standing here today is someone who speaks with a newfound intent, articulates with learned conviction, and writes with purposeful prose. And I can say that it is with certainty that it's my time in the English department and the support from its faculty and staff that has gifted me with the opportunity to make such a meaningful journey. The growth I have experienced in pursuit of the BA will make me, I know, a better physician, scientist, and global citizen. Going into college, many told me that interests change, and students often stray off their intended path. And I always saw that deviation as a bad thing, something to avoid at every cost. But I look now at where deviating got me, and how much I grew as a person as a result. Now as I move on to the next chapter of my life, I see my journey as Duke as testament to the belief that sometimes wandering into the unknown can lead you to a brand new destination, better than the original one. A respected professor in the English department told me very recently that above all, one should be satisfied with what they choose to do, and that satisfaction comes from feeling you're exploring as many of your interests as you can. And he said sometimes that means forging your own path and creating possibilities you thought would never have existed. I'll take that mindset and squish it into my carry-on, taking it with me back home as a guideline for how to traverse my future. I'll embrace all the unknowns, the sudden interests, and the shakeups, not as instruments of distraction, but ones that are meant to hone my path and direct me through to my next destination, wherever that may be. Thank you so much, and congratulations, everyone.
That's fabulous. We have another student speaker, Hannah Bransky.
Parents, families, friends, faculty, welcome. It's a tremendous honor to first follow Manil and also address you on behalf of all of the English majors in the class of 2022. I'm incredibly excited, but I'll be honest, it's terrifying to address students who have spent the last 4 years immersed in some of the most brilliant works of literature this great big world has to offer. And that's to say nothing of the faculty who have devoted their lives to the greatest sentences in the English language. When I got to Duke, I, like Anil and perhaps many of us, did not think that I would be, of all things, an English major. I had my eye set on different flavors of unemployment. I came here to major in political science. In the name of trying new things, I joined an astronomy class. I was drawn to what a favorite professor would later call poetry with calculus. But after a week in astrophysics, let it suffice to say, I was much better at the poetry than I was at the calculus. As the deadline to lock in my first semester of classes loomed, I panicked and I joined a Shakespeare seminar. Having opted for star-crossed lovers instead of just the stars, I sat in rapture and uncharacteristic silence as my peers spoke with the sophistication of scholars about a single line of Hamlet. Before class, after class, and sometimes, admittedly, while my professor was talking, I learned about the follies of my classmates, their harebrained tendencies, their subtle quirks, their hidden talents. I dropped out of a class on the stars, only to find supernova-style brilliance right here in the English department. My plan to be a political science major, and just a political science major, was changing. There's a saying in politics: You campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. I think we ought to do it all in poetry. Suddenly, this love of poems and love of prose meant that I kept turning up like a bad penny in English class after English class after English class. I was reading tales penned by the world's foremost storytellers, but I was chasing anecdotes from my classmates, hanging off their every word, not Melville's. I heard fantastic stories of cliff diving across the country, of sitting amongst world leaders, and I heard stories of burning scrambled eggs and terrible, awful, very bad Tinder dates. I can say this now because I'm pretty sure that they've printed my diploma already. I was much more interested in what my classmates had to say outside of class than I was in doing the assigned reading for class. The stories they told me, the imperfections they let me see, the way they painted their mundane moments as beautiful and their beautiful moments so humbly, enticed me. I wanted to join them, and I did. I declared that I was an English major. These days, being the main character is all the rage. For those of you who don't get that reference, congratulations on not being as addicted to your phone as I am. It's a TikTok thing. For those non-students in the audience, TikTok is a highly addictive app. And for my parents, apps are those boxes that you download onto your, okay, cool. The thrust of TikTok's albeit questionable wisdom is this. You are the main character in your story, and thus you should live your life as if it were a movie, with confidence, romance, and an awesome cinematic score, the kind of movie an English major might write. Everyone wants to be the main character, or at least have the costuming of one. But we're Duke English majors, and we know something that not everyone does. A story is really only as good as its supporting cast. And our supporting cast is great. We often hear quips from our non-English major friends about how we're unemployable. Sometimes we make these jokes ourselves. But were we to close read these silly little jokes that we laugh just a little too hard at, we might find that the lack of a single career track redounds to the benefit of all. There's no such thing as a typical English major. We are writers destined to become screenwriters, readers destined to become lawyers, thinkers destined to become executives, and poets destined to become failed poets. Each of us has come to this place with our own story, and instead of denying the world our voice, we've honed it, and then we've shared it. Over the last 4 years, we've been each other's supporting cast, and we've been each other's support systems. We've proofread each other's papers, we've given commentary on experimental poetry, and we've lent the vibrance of our stories to one another. Now we stand here, about to turn the page, close the book, write the next chapter, whatever one of the 1,000,001 cliches that graduation speakers the world over seem to steal from our chosen field of study. The point is, we are ready. Armed with the knowledge that a comma cannot, in fact, connect two separate sentences, that Shakespeare's comedies end in marriage and his tragedies in death, and that Emily Dickinson was definitely hooking up with her sister-in-law, we are prepared to strike out on our own. As we take this step away from days spent discussing the tropes of Victorian literature or waxing poetic about even the goriest scenes of The Godfather, I know that we'll be better readers, writers, and thinkers. But my hope is that we also remember what wasn't on the syllabus. Talking Toni Morrison and reciting Robert Frost will quietly brag of our intellect, but understanding how to tell our stories and how to listen to those of others with generosity will speak to our character. I hope we will take it upon ourselves as storytellers to tell the most urgent, important stories. I hope we'll use our exceptional voices in a moment when they're desperately needed for big, earth-shaking good. But this moment calls for what we English majors have come to know as a both and. As we stand on the precipice of what's next, I hope we do both big and small. I hope we will venture out into whatever world lies beyond this place and just allow ourselves to be overwhelmed and occasionally underwhelmed by the sheer might of the stories we will encounter. I hope we'll engage with the neighbor that we just keep bumping into on laundry day. I hope we have the bravery to reach out to the boring coworker who sits in the cubicle behind us, ask her to lunch, and discover if she is a secret wealth of knowledge or indeed just boring. I hope we ask our elders for their insights and our juniors for their dreams. I hope we have the courage to add every single story to the canon, to stack our bookshelves high with the people we meet and the places we encounter. Even though the days of seminars in the Allen Building and trying to remember which of Shakespeare's Richards had the bad back are over now, I hope that we never stop seeking out stories, building our supporting cast. It's my hope that we never actually stop being English majors. Thank you.
So when I mentioned that this ceremony is one of the reasons that makes me feel proud to be part of the English department, these two talks are examples of that. Thank you so much, that was fabulous. We have 2 awards that we would like to give. We have a number of awards we make in the department, but we're talking about the awards here for people who are graduating. So all the awards are listed at the end of the program. But the first award that we'll talk about here on stage is for the most original thesis, honors thesis or extension thesis, and this will be presented by Professor Tom Ferraro.
Hi, everybody. We get a little nervous up here because although we stand routinely in front of groups, usually you can see the people that you are speaking with, and they recur over the course of the semester. So I hope I assume you can see me. We're not used to bright lights, and I'm going to try to have you in mind, even as these are my major folk. My question, to begin with, have any of you watched on Netflix a Western called Godless? No? All right, well this is a rec, all right, from somebody who adores Cormac McCarthy and Deadwood, and for that matter, Rawlings. This is a 2017 Netflix limited series that has Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey speaking TV Southern Western speech, as well as Jeff Daniels, who is on some other planet, and Sam Waterston. The reason I start with this is because Taylor Plett's senior thesis, all right, is a key to understanding why Godless is not quite as godless as its title sounds. What you need to know, and this despite the fact that Taylor, who's a very stubborn person, admitted the other day that she had voided Professor Mike D'Alessandra's suggestion that she go after Godless. All right, so we start a little impishly, and with the future of current media in mind. Now, what you need to know is that Plett's senior thesis, called Paradise Retold, Changing Cosmologies of the Western Frontier, I think I helped with that, was not what I signed up for. It wasn't even what Taylor signed up for. It was early spring of 2020 when we agreed to a very different project, one closer to what I research and teach, but she took a gap year to duck COVID on campus and then ended up in Western Montana working on a documentary film about indigenous foodways, and came back to campus last fall pondering how America's stories had portrayed what was then called manifest destiny, that is, the Christian idea of conquest and settlement of the West, which had stolen land and laid waste to its inhabitants in the name of God, in the name, more specifically, of cultivating the land. Others have wondered, not surprisingly, but Taylor's key insight was the once attractive, now historically somewhat suspect idea of cultivation. She had worked on the Duke farm. Did you know there was a farm? It's very cool. And she was taking a course on Milton, that's John Milton, with Professor David Ayers. And she had started seeking the origins of the U.S. discourse of God-sanctioned working of the land in Milton's prescient Protestant vision. I'm dropping names for a purpose, you just have to wait. In anticipation of the philosophy of John Locke. And then she discovered that one of the foundational books of the field of American studies, Leo Marx's Machine in the Garden from 1964, starts with Shakespeare's The Tempest, an alternative take on Milton and Locke's issues, and that one of Duke's former luminaries, Jane Tompkins, had addressed the God absence of the Western in a book that Professor Mike D'Alessandro urged upon her. Few, all right, that's long sentences, big names, but there's a point. Hang on. Now, that's English. Taylor went forward intellectually by going back historically and consulting other faculty laterally, as it were. Evolutions of thought constituting the real progress of suspecting progress. All right, so the originality is generated by swirling back through history, a history of older thought and even older scholarship. You know, this is the U.S. Everything more than 3 weeks is supposed to be out of fashion. Our press specializes in that. Anyway, for the truth was that Taylor had her ultimate eye on a, now get this, Coen Brothers, we're back to Netflix. This time it's a Coen Brothers film called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which you may or may not have seen. It consists of 6 parables, or really anti-parables, about the West and God stuff within the Old West. And it made increasing sense as a constellation of stories, all right, in which the conventions of the Western, I'm going to do a little more naming, had been Gothicized, as understood by Professor Taylor Black and captured by student Taylor Platt. In my family, there's a lot of confusion about Taylors. In uncanny sync with American studies, here we go, cowboy songs, especially Big Rock Candy Mountain. All right, you don't have to gather all this, you just have to gather that it's being configured. All right? The thesis itself is composed of some smart, pointed, close readings constituting 2 major chapters that you need to read to appreciate, and the whole is itself haunted by a kind of absent middle, since it moves us too quickly from the anticipations of 17th century England to the mythological demystifications of 2018, being referenced, of course, in between. But the absence may be, in fact, the biggest discovery of them all, but that's up to her dissertation. It's not up to me to figure out. But I have stolen the time here on this bully pulpit, not to swell Taylor's head, but to take a note from Taylor herself regarding the collective nature of English work, even a project as seemingly loathsome as writing a senior thesis during COVID. Taylor's originality is a direct result of how these students and faculty you see to your right together in and around the Department of English. Taylor, but also Margot and Dylan and Becca, Hannah, but also Devin and Zella. Duke University understands collaboration on the model of research labs and clinical studies, but we collaborate by hanging out and seeking out and chatting up. As Taylor herself quips, it takes a village to raise a senior thesis.
Okay, so thank you, Tom, and thank you, Taylor, for the thesis. And the second of our awards, on the stage at least, is for the Stanley E. Fish Award for Outstanding Work in British Literature, and presenting that award is Taylor Black. I think though perhaps comments from Mike, I'm not sure. Yes, from Michael Del Santro.
Mike D'Alessandro can't be here. I'm going to read his words. Although I could have just said I was him, you wouldn't know. So pretend I'm him. I'm a medium. This is the award for his student, Carrie Larson, and here's what he says. 2 years ago, Carrie asked me to be the advisor on her distinction thesis and explain her proposed topic, a cross-cultural study of the justice systems in Shelley's Frankenstein and Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. My immediate thought was that there must be someone better qualified to do this, direct the project, that is. Still, I was excited by the prospect and a little selfish because if you've met her, you know that her passion is infectious and her intellect seemingly boundless. As the project began to take shape, ultimately transforming into an illuminating study of Frankenstein and Dickens' Oliver Twist against England's contemporaneous legal histories and social class biases, I knew that I was becoming witness to something special. Although many scholars have tackled these two texts before, rarely, if ever, has anyone put them into conversation. The juxtaposition opens up all types of insights about law, authorship, and activism. From the analysis of the court's gender and class prejudices in Frankenstein to her discussion of brutal mob justice sequences in Oliver Twist, Carrie uncovers the hypocrisies inherent within an ostensibly fair justice system. As she so astutely suggests, these are top-down problems. Many of the characters may be the deliverers of unwarranted judgments, but they are merely mimicking the flawed principles of justice descending from broader societal systems. And as if that weren't enough, her thesis excels in so many ways and so many fundamentals of successful literary analysis. Shrewd selection of textual evidence, persuasive commentary, superb research, and polished prose. It is simultaneously a revelatory case study and an exquisite piece of writing. It is, I heard some of it at a presentation. So although I cannot be there in person today, I want to congratulate her once again on the well-earned Stanley Fish Prize and join my department in wishing her all the best in her future endeavors.
Thank you, Taylor, and also thank you, Carrie. We're now going to move to the part of the ceremony where we, instead of having lots of words about one name, we have just names. So this is the point where people will come and get their diplomas. So if you want to take a picture, I guess prime your camera, get it ready. And announcing the names will be our Director of Undergraduate Studies, Corinne Stan, who probably does deserve an ovation just for applause, at least for the work she's done this year.
Thank you very much. It is my privilege and honor to announce our graduating English majors. Margot Elaine Armbruster. Sullivan Margaret Brown. Karina Chavez Santana. Bates Wheaton Crawford. Mason Scott Eaglin. Charlotte Ann Fountain. Margaret Louise Gall. Falia Griffin Halloran. Jeremy Abraham Jacobs. Jacqueline Lorraine Jaffe. Catherine Louise Johnson. James Tristan Callagher. Elias Baker Klein. Sarah Ann Larkin. Kari Dora Larsen. Devin Telford Moses. Caroline Petra Cohen. Taylor Madison Platt. Anil Prasad. Hannah Branston Ramsey. Alexandria Nicole Smith. Samantha Laverne Sue. Rebecca Williamson. And Devin Maya Yadav.
So we are essentially at the end of our ceremony now, although I will say we're going to have music at the end, so don't get up until the music has stopped, and our graduates have gone out of the auditorium. But before we do get to the end, I want to thank, and I would encourage you to join me in thanking, the staff of the English department, and especially Michelle Dove, Quante Holder, and Catherine Bieber for all of their work in making this event possible. Thank you. And now I want to close our commencement ceremony of 2022 by stressing to the family and friends of our graduates what a privilege it has been for us as faculty and staff to get a chance to know these students, that is your children, grandchildren, siblings, friends, whatever relationship you have to them. And to our graduating seniors, I want to say thank you from our faculty and staff for bringing your energy, insight, and love of literature and language to our department. And please keep in touch. Thank you. As I mentioned, there's music. There's also some food in the foyer, but again, wait till the music is over.